Hi there, welcome back to Green TV, and I am very pleased to bring you a guest that I have come to know in the last few months. You're going to learn a ton from him. You're going to like him because he's a very unlikely climate activist. Going to introduce you right now to Brad Rouse. He is the author of a new book called Climate Warrior. And we met online, and Brad kindly offered to send me a hard copy of the book, Climate Warrior. And you can see it's got a lot of bookmarks in there because I was on a panel in June in Rome on e-mobility put on by Accenture. And I had to quickly come up to speed on the grid and how does it work anyway? And is there like, what's the physicality of it? I hear a lot about it. We hear a lot about it, but how does it actually work? So Brad was sort of my consultant. I was, checking in. And so great to have you back. Great to have you on Green TV. I guess this is the first time, even though we've become, good friends. And I love your story because you are an unlikely climate activist and warrior. I too am a climate warrior and worrier. They kind of go together, but hopefully we emphasize the warrior part and the solutions part more often. And I would love to just quickly, before we get a little bit more about your road to this book and to activism, and your professional experience, which is in, the grid and electricity and, what needs to happen to green the grid. I want to just get your take on this recently passed and signed climate bill. They call it the IRA, Inflation Reduction Act. I'm not sure how much it's going to reduce inflation, but it is going to do some good things for climate. Not all good, though. However, thank you to Joe Manchin. But overall, it seems to be, the consensus seems to be this is a much needed plus injection of hope and energy, just at a critical time because we were just like, things are getting so dire. And so are you energized, so to speak, by this recent news?
I am. I mean, we had a group celebration Wednesday night where we got a group of people together and we celebrated the results of it. I think it's going to be transformative, and it will move us a long way toward where we need to be. It contains many great provisions in and what I really, we were so in the dumps 2 or 3 weeks before it happened, and then just all this. I mean, I think that created that increased the joy that it was that it was passed because of the whole idea of Peanuts character and pulling the football right, Manchin pulling the football at the last the last minute, and then no, he really didn't, and so we got some.
It's a crazy thing to play games with our climate, our one and only atmosphere and home.
Totally, but that's, as somebody was complaining about it the other day, and it was like, well, we can thank goodness for the great citizens of Georgia and Stacey Abrams for actually having 2 Democratic senators so that we would not even have this. And I don't think we would have had a bipartisan bill that could go nearly as far as this one goes. So,
not to mention the last 3 to 5 years, you mentioned the last few weeks with Trump. I mean, how down did we get? How despairing did we appropriately get? And to have good news, like when, Joe Biden was inaugurated, it was like, okay, hope, and then some disappointment, some hope, some disappointment, but the news about the impacts of climate change is getting worse by the day. Extreme weather happening somewhere in the world every other day. This was just like, okay, now we have a chance.
Right, and it's not the bill that I would have wanted per se, because I'm a big advocate of carbon pricing, and the problem politically with having carbon pricing come in, and I understand that there was carbon pricing on the table, and Senator Whitehouse, who's one of my climate heroes in the book, could not get it all the way through. And the reason, I think the real reason was that, let's face it, carbon pricing, the way most people have proposed it, is adds to inflation. Now, because it puts a carbon fee on, and so you're going to get inflation. You're going to get a higher price of gas if you have a carbon fee. This approach gives you the opportunity to have a lower cost because it's using the form of subsidies, government subsidies. So it may very well be, it was really a stroke of brilliance, somebody to rename it Inflation Reduction Act. It doesn't reduce inflation. It is it is the way to go if you want to say, well, I want to reduce inflation. This is the kind of climate bill you have to pass. If you want to do a carbon fee, I mean, it's all about the inflation numbers. I mean, they don't really make any sense because the bill that I was in favor of, the Energy Innovation Act, had a carbon fee, but then it would give a rebate to people. So yeah, you'd have some inflation, but people would be getting a check. But it's all in the politics of it.
It's in the packaging and the politics.
It's in the packaging, and this was a better packaged bill than what I was for. So,
and I think there's something to be said for Democrats maybe kind of taking a page from the Republicans' playbook and being strategic, and maybe a little strategic, I guess is the word. They really played this right. Whatever went on behind closed doors. Thank you, Chuck Schumer, and Joe Biden, I'm sure, was in on it. And
sure,
it just after a year of Manchin going back and forth and dangling this stick and us wanting to hit him over the head with it, he came through, even though not without some poison pills added.
I just like to.
How much does that undo the good? What Joe Manchin required to be put in there?
Sure, I would just say that this bill actually, though, and carbon pricing is the same way. It doesn't actually do anything, okay, by itself. In other words, it creates a series of incentives, of carrots, but people have to eat the carrots in order for the bill to actually have an effect. People have to, so there's an opportunity for activism that comes out of this bill, which is very much in the book, and I talk about it, and it's kind of been my strategy all along, for people now to encourage themselves in their own homes to put in a heat pump or put in solar panels, or their local utilities, their cities, their counties, their states, their businesses, their nonprofit associations, wherever you have an impact, to learn about this bill and then figure out, okay, how can we get those institutions and people to take advantage of that bill to the max? We all as a society have to ramp it up at that very granular level. I mean, we just not taking advantage of the bill, but I just had worked with a group at my church to put a 20 kilowatt solar array on the roof. That's the kind of thing we need to be doing all over. And actually, one of the great aspects of the bill, there are provisions to where nonprofits can start to take advantage of some of the tax rebates that were only available to taxpayers in earlier versions of the solar and wind and battery tax credits. So
you're encouraged.
But we all have to get going with it.
It's later than we think, or some of us know. But I think that just think for a moment about something that's not mentioned much, if at all. It's sort of like what this does for the public perception of climate change. This legitimizes the fact that we have a dire emergency. And if you were paying attention, and certainly the people who I interview on Beat the Solutionaries and who are on Green TV know all too well, we're the ones who lose sleep at night. We'd like other people to get a little less sleep so we could get a little bit more. But I just like just across the board, Republicans, Democrats, red state, blue states, this is now like officially legislation. And so there should be no more denying. And the last gasp of the deniasaurus has been heard, let's hope. So we turned a corner, and none too soon.
Well, this bill doesn't really lead with climate at all. It leads with inflation reduction. It leads with energy independence. It leads with onshoring manufacturing. It leads with energy resilience, national security, all of those side benefits of acting on climate. So it really, I think, we don't actually need to talk. When people say, well, gee, this bill we shouldn't really have never done it, it was stupid. Well, no, we needed to do it because of climate change. And it's going to have all these side benefits, but acting on I think if we can create a groundswell of action to move our economy to renewable energy and away from fossil fuels, and that's where and say, talking to people about how they can save money by taking advantage of the bill.
Mm-hmm. And save their children's future, or give them a better shot of not living in a climate changed world.
Right. And so climate activists can start to make those changes themselves in their own homes and businesses and everything. And they can talk about the importance of the energy transition, because I think you get a lot more support across the board for the idea of moving to clean energy, honestly, than you do for how bad is the climate crisis. I mean, there's a certain group of people that are going to react to that, and that's fine. I mean, we think it's really bad. I mean, I'm just looking at, well, what's the best approach to get people to move on this?
And maybe the timing was in some way, we know it's so late in the game. Those of us who've been fighting for energy policy that reflects reality and our future. But it just, like, we've had such a succession of, fires, drought, heat, and like a drought in Massachusetts, that's not normal. So much about this is not normal.
Right.
Record-breaking temperatures and drought in England, where it rains all the time, historically, that maybe it had to be, in some way, that it's so late in the game, but just in time. Let's hope.
Let's hope. Well, we need to have active hope.
Yes, we do.
So,
and
hope in action.
You are a very hopeful guy, and you do know a lot about sort of the nuts and bolts, the greening of the grid and what's involved. What really needs to happen now that this is now legislation, call it IRA, but it's really, a big chunk of it is addressing the climate. Do we have the capability? Do we have the actual, like, I don't know, whatever physical parts we need to green the grid? Do we have trained, workers to do this? How much of a boost is this legislation going to give it, or not really at all, in terms of behind the scenes, getting more renewable energy into the system?
This bill helps, but it's not enough. And there's going to be a lot more that's needed. But basically what we need to do, and I talk about this a lot in the book, is we need to do three things. We need to, first of all, embrace efficiency. So there are just many opportunities to use less energy through the technologies that are available today, from bike share, biking to work, and just turning your thermostat down, to very sophisticated technologies. So we need to and I get involved, and I've done a lot of these over the years, but insulation and more efficient appliances and all of those kinds of things. There's just many things we need to embrace efficiency. The second thing that we need to do is we need to green the grid, so that the electric grid is as low in carbon as possible. And that really comes from utilities and people reducing energy, but also transforming our energy system to make a greater use of renewables. And one of the great things about this process is that wind and solar costs have come down so far, and with the bill they come down even further, to where if utilities and people can just learn how to use wind and solar, they're going to take advantage. It's to say, oh, we can't do wind and solar because of intermittency and these other problems. I spent a lot of time in the book on the issue of the variability of wind and solar and how hard that is to solve. But if we can just figure out how to solve that, then it will become the cheapest source of energy that we've ever had. So we green the grid. Nuclear may have a role. I'm not absolutely against nuclear, but it's got to come down in price before it's going to compete with wind and solar. And there's some possibility of that, some things that are going on, but I'm skeptical. And then finally, besides greening the grid, then when we've got a green grid, we need to grow the grid, because the other thing we need to do is electrify everything, which is all of those direct. And actually, the grid is only about 20 to 30, somewhere between 20 and 30% of our total carbon emissions today. So all the other carbon emissions, we've got, the best approach to reducing those carbon emissions is to take what we were doing, whatever it was, driving a car, heating your home, those are the two biggies, our trucks, our transportation and buildings, and convert that to electricity.
Cooling our homes too, because it's getting hotter, right? That's air conditioning.
Air conditioning is going to be something we're going to have to. Air conditioning is electric already, and people are going to do it because it's getting hotter and incomes are rising around the world where they haven't had air conditioning before. When we do that, we need to make sure that the air conditioning that we add is also capable of heating. So heat pumps, instead of just pure air conditioners, it's really a very small modification to change it regular, or to have and only a small extra expense to buy a heat pump versus buying a standard air conditioner. And so, I know up there in New York, they're doing a big project where there's a bunch of these window air conditioners that you have in New York City that are now coming in to be heat pumps. This company called Gradient is doing a big project in New York City, I think. So look into that.
Well, I live in
those are the three things we need to do.
I live in a green building, so they're already doing it right here.
So
West 57. But the possibility of, just really ramping up solar and wind, I've heard, well, we don't have the capability to really do that. And of course, Mark Jacobson at Stanford has, done a review that has been both
He says we do.
criticized. He says we do, but that would take like everything going right. So what are the main obstacles now that we finally have some legislation? We finally have a world that's freaking out appropriately, saying what the heck is going on, because climate change, extreme weather is hitting everybody, or it will. So now that we're past all that, and too bad it took 20 years to really, raise awareness and get people, into action, hopefully, to like, just, can we do it? Like we just say, if we just said, we're going to green the grid, go to renewables, wind energy, solar energy, I don't know, tidal energy, geothermal, some of the other things that have been talked about. What's really stopping us now? We're slowing
well, the bill moves us a long way towards what we need. There's a couple of things that are stopping. One, not everybody's convinced we can do it, and so and a lot of these are engineering type people who Mark Jacobson's an engineer, okay, so and he's a proponent of saying we can do it. But we don't really have any grids that are really totally running on wind and solar. We have some electric grids around the world, like Iceland, for example, that's heavily hydro or geothermal dominated, that are kind of special cases, and so they are running on renewables all the way. But the wind and solar present some specific problems. Nobody's running a continent scale grid, so all we can rely on are the models. And so people, I think what we need is to see it being done, okay, and to make sure that we can do it. But I think everybody agrees that we can get to about 90, and then talk about this in the book. We've got what we need to get to about 90% carbon free on the grid without we know how to do that. That can be done. It's that final 100% that becomes really hard. The other thing that's a problem is really the speed or scale at which we can do it. And I go through the math in the book, but we need to be installing about 6 times in the United States. We need to be installing about 6 times more wind and solar than we installed in 2021 every year, or maybe 4 or 5. I just looked at the exact numbers, but 4 to 5 times more wind and solar than we installed in 2021. Well, that's a major growth. Now, China is doing it. China's installing that much wind and solar. They did last year. We need to get up to what China's doing and be able to do it every year, and we're not there yet. Hopefully this bill will help move us along at the speed. Another problem is that there's a lot of solar projects that have been proposed, and the utilities are not able to actually interconnect those projects. And so the projects are not being built. The capital's raised, the developers are ready, but the problem is, and this is going to be the next big battle, is the battle over permitting reform, and just the battle over getting permission and building. We're going to need some extra transmission. The process to do all that is very, very slow. And so we're going to need to speed it up. And that may cause some environmental angst, especially if we have to, and that's going to be the next big battle is, and I'm thinking that was part of the deal that was made with Manchin, is that they would allow this bill to be a bill that increases permitting, speeds up permitting just in general of these assets. But we're going to need to move faster, and that's where permitting reform comes in. And do we have to throw a bone to the fossil fuel interests in order to get their vote to allow this to move forward? That's going to be the environmental battle. And
Manchin's, provisions, they certainly don't cancel out all the good. Can you give us a rough percentage of how much bad it adds into the mix of the good?
Leah Stokes in California and Jesse Jackson at Princeton have done. They were on with Dave Roberts recently on a podcast that I encourage you to look at. But basically, they've run through the numbers, looked at other modeling systems, run through the numbers. The bill itself about 5%. It's like 900 steps forward in the bill, 50 steps back. So
Okay, that's pretty good. That's pretty good.
I'm good with 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I mean, a lot of times, if you say, well, I don't want to go forward because I know I'll have to go back a little bit. We wouldn't want to do it that. We don't want to do it that. We want to be realistic. And so it's a good trade-off, in my opinion. And honestly, the faster our society moves to take up the good parts of the bill, the less chance is that economics will allow the bad part of the bill to move forward. I mean, if we are good at converting to electric vehicles, then if we exceed expectations, it just takes off and all of that happens, then there's going to be less demand for oil. So we're less likely to get new oil drilling in sensitive areas because nobody would pay for it. Everybody be crazy to pay for it. So
I think
that's the hope
that we start seeing.
On the other hand, if we don't do a big uptake of these measures in the bill, if we can't get permitting reform, for example, then we're likely to get more oil drilling in sensitive areas. So that's really the trade.
Okay, I want to go back before we go forward and just tell us a little bit about what you were doing when you had your, I call it eco epiphany, or what got you to wake up and smell the carbon and go, whoa, and how did that change? How did that change your work in your life? Right.
Well, I've had 2 careers in my life. One as a working providing software to the utility industry to do long range planning, and the other I had a stint as a personal financial advisor. So I'm a certified. I was a certified financial planner, and I had a practice doing that work. In my utility work, I'd been working for the other side, and then in my financial advisor work, I was working with wealthy people. But what I had always been interested in and concerned about the future. I mean, all of that work involved the future. So I've always been interested in what was going to happen with the future. I've always been interested in what was going to happen with the future of humanity, and read a lot of books. I read voraciously about that. And so I was always interested in climate change. And I always thought that, climate change issue is going to be interesting to watch. I hope we do well, but the responsible people, for sure, the responsible people in Congress are going to do the right thing. I mean, we've had bipartisan action before, but slowly in the 2000s, in my financial practice, I found myself advising people about the future and what to do with their wealth. And, and I would also advise people, one of the best things you can do with your money is to make an investment in making your home more energy efficient. But, just as an advisor, that's a good investment. That's better. You're going to get a better return doing that than other things.
Low hanging fruit.
But I just gradually came to a realization that the people in charge weren't doing what they needed to do, that I had a background in energy, and I needed to get involved. And so I sold my financial advisory business and decided in 2012 to full-time work on climate. And that was
glad you did.
I'd seen Inconvenient Truth in 2006, and I was getting more and more concerned, reading up on it. And then I did Climate Reality, which I think you did in 2012 in San Francisco.
No, I did January 2007. I was like class number 6.
Right. You were a lot before me, but there have been a lot of people to go through that process, and that really opened my eyes to the fact that, and I tell this all in the book, but that really opened my ideas to the idea that there's a whole group of people that are involved in this. It's a movement, and I have a special skill that I can involve, because of my background in utility industry planning, that I should be involved in this. That this is something that can be part of my legacy, and so I plan to work on this for as long as I'm able.
Yeah, we need all hands on deck, and that's what I encourage. People, whether they're college kids thinking about a career in, journalism or law or medicine, put a green tint on it. And also for people who are already entrenched in their careers, like I did, working in radio news and then starting a green feature, and then I went off the deep end. Once you learn about this stuff, it can be all consuming. But that's a good thing. And again, if we have more people concerned and active and working on it, then it can give those of us who have been, trying to bang on the doors, and in my case on the networks, say, this is news, give us a little rest. Just a little bit, because we got more people out there aware, and awareness is so important, isn't it?
Yeah. So I know we're running a little bit short on time. Do we have time for me to just talk briefly about the book?
Yes, please do. Give us an overview.
Let
And
me give you a quick, and first of all, I'm going to share my screen real quick and just tell you a little bit about what the book. This is the cover of the book, and it's available. It's available wherever books are sold. There's a website, www.climatewarriorbook.com, that you can go to. And in doing these presentations about the book, I kind of, and looking at what other people have said, I kind of come up with an idea of, well, what makes it a different kind of a climate book? And I think there's basically four things. One of the reviewers that Kirkus reviews, they use the word memoiristic in describing the book. And I honestly had never seen that word. I looked it up. It's not a word. So according to Webster's.
I'm not
so
sure
maybe
solutionaries is, but I started using with solutionaries, and now it's catching on. Or solution.
Right. I mean, I kind of like it because it weaves together my personal story, my experiences in trying to make a difference, my energy expertise, and I think it just makes it more readable. And so there are some chapters that are just about my experience, my background. For example, one of the things somebody can do is they can, and I've seen a lot of these books. Here are all the things you can do to reduce your carbon footprint. You can, do this and do that, do this, and bound it with statistics. And what I decided to tell that story a little bit differently. This had been something that I've been doing way before I was worried about climate, all the way back to the 70s when we lived in Boston and tried to heat by wood. But there's a whole series of things that I've done over my career. And so I tell the story about all the houses that I've lived in and all the things that I did to save energy. And when you pull all of it together, it's pretty much how to do it told in a story form. And I do this throughout the book. And I think a lot of people said, gee, this is more readable than other books that are more academically oriented. I tell the story of how I started a nonprofit to help low-income people save energy, and honestly think that's one of the wonderful aspects of this new bill is that they really put a lot of money towards low-income energy efficiency.
So needed, so overdue. Yeah.
But I do that by telling the story of the nonprofit and of some of the clients that we first encountered and what their stories were like. And so that the nonprofit Energy Savers Network could actually go to energysaversnetwork.org and look at what they're doing up here in Western North Carolina. The book is also hopeful. It's less focused on the doom and gloom. Just one chapter on climate science, very brief chapter that is told in a memoiristic way because it's sort of a short version of the presentation that I would give after I did the Al Gore climate reality trainings. Let's focus on the doom and gloom, and then a lot on the future. A lot of the utility is the story of both my vision of the future, how we can make it happen, and an example of how to make a difference. So I've had a lot of good reviews of the book. I'm not a famous person at all, and
well, now you will be, now that you're on Green TV.
Right. And so am I not sharing? I'm not sharing now, right? Okay. Maybe I will be now. I get a little bit of fame here and there and add it to it. So.
Well, I've always thought that we've got so much overemphasis ad nauseum on celebrities in this country. Maybe a little more emphasis on scientists, and I like to make the everyday eco warriors the heroes and sheroes that should be, and that's what I've been doing for 25 years.
And that's another. I'm going to say this about not only the book but about the movement. My definition of a climate warrior is pretty much anybody who's involved full time in solving the problem. So it could easily be a solar panel installer, or a welder, or an electrician, or a laborer that is in the movement in my definition. And so when you look at the people that are working in the solutions, the people that are activists, the people that are doing things to try to solve the problem, there are millions of us. And just like and some people object to me using the warrior analogy. The idea, they don't like the idea of a war, but
Then we shouldn't be declaring war on the environment, which has been going very well, by the way.
And I see the war aspect of it, not so much in the conflict, but in the idea of the scale and scope of what we need to do. And the number of people that need to be involved. And just like in World War II, you know, there were millions of people involved in World War II. They all had a story. Okay. That story was all related to the macro events that were going on at the time in some way or another. And I think the same is true of the climate warriors. We all have a story. And so I hope a lot of people will write their story, and that it'll be part of the history of this when we look back on it, or when the future looks back on it. And that my story is one of millions. And I just wanted, COVID gave me the opportunity to have a little time and write a book about my story of the movement and how it fits in to what's going on overall.
I like that. In history, I always say herstory. I like to play with words because there's a
Okay,
lot of women in this fight.
There are a lot of women in the fight. Yeah.
And we need more men, women, children. And then maybe that's a good place to start wrapping up, is the next generation, because I hear so many of my peers, fellow parents, boomers, whatever, say, you know, give up on our generation. Our kids get it. They're dealing with it. We can't change. And I say, nope.
But we're the ones with the money still. So,
right.
You know,
money and time, you know, I have friends who are,
and a little bit of time. Yes.
I'm not retiring. You're not retiring, but you know, if you have any children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, pets, you know, parks, whatever you love, it's all threatened. And that's not hyperbole, by extreme weather events and disease and insect-borne ticks and all, or diseases that insects carry, whatever that term is. It's all, you know, the pine beetle, you know, infestation, it's all going south quickly. And like all the jelly, someone was just posting on Facebook, they were in Malta, which looks gorgeous. For some reason, it's suddenly the hot place to go. And
the bugs are gone. You know, and down here in the South, we'd get hit by all these bugs. The plankton is threatened in the ocean.
Jellyfish all over. They couldn't swim in this gorgeous, beautiful aqua water that just looked like a poster because there were jellyfish everywhere. And that is absolutely part of climate change. People don't necessarily know that, connect the dots, but everything bad. You can't blame everything on climate change, even though I try to, but a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. It's enough that we should not want it, and we should do everything. Really should be a stop the presses moment. Like as someone posted, like, why are we doing anything else but trying to save civilization? Let's get humanity back on track, because the planet is
fighting wars
better off without us. Oh, that's the worst of all.
If we would spend a fraction of our military budget on climate, I mean, just to look at even this bill, I mean, it's what, about $35-40 billion a year compared to $800 billion a year on defense.
Yep. Not to mention, you know, war is not good for the environment at all. Not to mention, you know, just it takes up news space where we should have climate topping the news. Finally, it's always something. And then
totally. So, well, there's a thing in the book where I talk about how much climate spending we need and what we spend. I mean, what we spend on alcohol and cigarettes, what we spend on, you know, some of the other things, that clothing and eating out. I mean, if we spend a fraction of what we spend eating out on climate, man, we'd solve it. You know, it's
not to mention all the
question of priorities.
Not to mention all the money goes into advertising and selling us consumer goods, some of which we need, a lot of which we don't. Right. And use resources, you know, that we like only in America can you walk into a CVS and see 30 brands of toothpaste, or maybe more. You know, it's like we have too much of everything, you know, the deodorant aisle. It's like, I know it's getting hotter and all, but it takes up, you know.
The great thing though, I'll always try to bring up the hopeful thing, is that we, back 2006, 2007, when I saw Inconvenient Truth and I started running through what we would need to do to get there, it was a decided decline in the standard of living. I don't think we really have to, at least not just because of energy, maybe other reasons, but we don't really have to have a big decline in our standard of living. We have to change the way we do things, and we have to put some money up front. So we may have a temporary decline, but we can do what we need to do energy-wise without a decline. Actually, energy will be cheaper in the future if we do this.
Well, I'm going to have some people on who would take issue with that, but that's all right. That's what Green TV is all about.
I've had people take issue with what I just said before.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole degrowth movement, and capitalism, you know, unchecked growth cannot continue unabated.
Well, we should get back on and have another session on the degrowth, because I agree. I believe in degrowth in terms of the material aspects of our society, in terms of what we're extracting out of the ground. We got to degrowth what we extract out of the ground. But we don't need to degrowth services.
And there's people who say, well, you're never going to get anywhere with degrowth. That just sounds like defunding the police or something.
We don't need overall degrowth. We need to
No.
change the kind of growth we have.
But the comment that really resonates is, well, if it's degrowth or, what we have now, which is way too much luxury and comfort, being a first world country and the 1%, all that. But if it's degrowth or die, degrowth suddenly looks a little more appealing.
Yeah. And I think that's what we thought 15 years ago. It was really degrowth or die. Now I think we got to, because of what the advances in technology, at least from the climate perspective. Now, you got other things like plastics, which are another whole problem.
Yep.
Maybe that would
need. We've got it all here on Green TV. We don't just do climate, all shades of green. So
right.
Thank you so much. I like to end each interview with, okay, so we've touched on this. What can people do? They get it. They're concerned. They're, hopeful and energized by this IRA climate bill. What's the low-hanging fruit, and then the next stage that people can take away from this conversation?
Well, the low-hanging fruit is buy the book.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah, and then just just wake up every morning and think, okay, what I'm going to do about climate today, and can I get some co-benefits out of doing that help me improve my life? So
feel better,
save money, feel better, improve my life, and then do that, and then next day wake up and do it again.
Not to mention improve the lives of your children and grandchildren. Well, thank you, rather than yell at you, right?
Right.
Right. All right. Thanks so much, Brad Rouse. The book is Climate Warrior, and it's a hybrid, part memoir, part analysis of our critical energy future and how we're going to get there from here. I highly recommend it. It is very readable. I will say that. I've avoided things like the nuts and bolts of the grid and, how does it all work? I can't say that I understand it completely, but I have a much better sense of it between the books and our conversations. So thank you for your time, Brad.
Well, thank you.
Good luck with the book.
For having me.
We'll talk about some of those other, ancillary issues that are, things that you probably have some ideas on too, how we can be just more intelligent and more sustainable. I mean, that's a big word that gets used too much, but right now we're not. And so a lot of changes to be made, and that's what we're going to be discussing here on Green TV. Want to invite our viewers to please tell your friends and family, even your enemies, about Green TV, because it is for only those who eat, breathe, or drink. If you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you will help us get to our goal of 1,000 subscribers, and we will give you no spam. We just will alert you if you push the right button, notify you when these great interviews are posted, and then we can start live streaming, and then it'll be a whole new ballgame, because doing 1 or 2 of these interviews a week that have to get a little editing and take some time, a few days turnaround. I'm ready to do 4 or 5 hours a day, 5, 6, 7 days a week on all these issues that we have very little time to address, and very little awareness really on the part of the whole country, not to mention the world. That's one great thing about being on the World Wide Web. So thank you for your contribution to this Eco IQ raising platform.
I wanted to see the Mustang.
Okay, yeah.
This is gorgeous.
Thanks.
I didn't realize Mustang was making them.
Yeah. They only made, I think, 21,000 last year.
Yeah.
Because they started production.